get that video going.
Man, no wonder you do so well audio. You have such a good voice.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Comes from
Dang,
singing for a long time.
that must be a nice microphone you have as well, because you're coming in crisp and clear.
It's Rush Limbaugh's microphone.
I'm not even sure if I understand that joke, but it sounded good, especially the way you laughed afterwards.
Oh, Rush Limbaugh. He's like, Bill O'Reilly. Rush Limbaugh is worse.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had a feeling you were referencing something along those lines, but
Yeah.
so before we begin, I wanted to do a couple things, if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
First, is that like your place you're staying at right now?
No, we're Airbnb-ing it.
Oh, us
So
too,
we
actually.
Oh, right on. Yeah. It's so much fun, isn't it? It's just like things are changing all the time. You feel like you live a lot of people's lifestyles in just a few days. Some are totally awesome, other ones not so much.
Yeah, we got a good one. I know exactly what you mean. We have a good place right now. It was
Cool.
the couple.
Where are you guys?
We're in Eugene, Oregon, and you can
Oh, right on.
the couple was it's a gay couple, and they are very into interior design, and
They always have the best places.
yeah, for sure. What about you? Where are you at geographically right
We're
now?
in Nashville, Tennessee right now.
Okay, cool. The other thing I was going to do, if you're open to it, at our last retreat, one of my friends that we work with, he was saying something along the lines. He's like, "I don't know a better use of time than prayer because," and he started going off. And I was like, "Wait a minute, just cut it off right there. There's no because. That's a great statement right there. What better
Yeah.
use of time than prayer?" So if you're open to it, I was just going to say a quick prayer.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, dear Lord, just thank you so much for letting us have the technology for Abel and I to connect so clearly in a different dimension than the physical dimension, which to me is proof and obvious that there are other dimensions that are not seen that can be extremely powerful. And Lord, that being said, just speak through us and let us reach the most amount of people in the most effective way, and especially for the people that would benefit the most, including ourselves. I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, cool. I like to set the tone like that. I was going to do it by myself. I was like, hey, I'll just do it with them.
No, right on. I like that. That's cool.
Um, and then I'll start by reading your bio,
Cool.
because that's a cool bio.
I've certainly had some fun.
So, all right, I'm going to be introducing Abel James right now, and this is the bio. It is he is a leading voice in new media. Abel James is a best-selling author, musician, and talk show host. As the #1 most popular health podcast in 8+ countries, Abel's award-winning show, Fat Burning Man, has helped millions reclaim their health with real food, cutting-edge science, and primal workouts. When his cooking app, Caveman Feast, bested the Food Network, Nickelodeon, and even Angry Birds with more than 1,000 five-star reviews in the 24 hours, Abel became the first independent publisher ever to hold Apple's #1 food app and #1 podcast at the same time. After completing his BA at Dartmouth College a year early, Abel created his own interdisciplinary curriculum to study brain science, music, and technology, graduating as a senior fellow with honors. He later independently published his research in the musical brain, which became a #1 Amazon bestseller. As a speaker, entertainer, and consultant, Abel has presented keynotes for the federal government, lectured at Ivy League universities, and advised Fortune 500 companies, including Microsoft, Danaher, and Lockheed Martin. Also a musician and songwriter, Abel studied at the Royal College of Music and has toured internationally, jammed with country superstars, and won several awards for vocal performance. Hailing from the frosty backwoods of New Hampshire, Abel lives with his fiancée and yellow lab in the mountains of Colorado. Well, welcome to the show, Abel. That's awesome, man.
Thank you. I've been trying to do basically just follow whatever could be most awesome. And so it takes you to some really weird places. I think being a musician for a really long time has taken me on to some really weird places that I'd never expect. And also it teaches you, once you get used to making a fool out of yourself in front of thousands of people or hundreds of people, or even, your family as a musician, which I've been doing all my life, you realize like what a gift having a little bit of no shame is. You know what I mean? Just kind of getting it all right out there, having fun, and being unique and being interesting. So it's not always easy, but it's always fun.
Yeah, I can totally empathize with that, considering that's a lot of the work that we do at our retreats.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
curious though, was there a specific time like when you had to face one of your biggest fears, like when that concept, what you just said about kind of moving forward without shame, was there a
Mhm.
time that you had to like face a really dark fear or a deep fear to understand that or to embody that, or was it
Yeah, I
just
mean,
over
there are
time?
little tastes of that all the time. But one of the ways that, we've been living in national parks and state parks for a while, almost a year now. And so I'm hauling around, and my wife is too, an RV that's essentially the size of a semi. So it's like a big truck that pulls a 35-foot fifth wheel trailer. So sometimes, things don't go exactly the way that you'd like. Like our first truck caught fire in the middle of the woods on an incline, and things go wrong. And we got caught in a snowstorm in Colorado where it went from like 70 degrees to below zero in just basically overnight. And our heater went out, and we were like, shivering for our lives because we were kind of stuck there, and then we couldn't drive it out. So I mean, there are so many different things where like driving around a beast that's that big, especially through the wilderness, just kind of recalibrates what fear really is. Because like when you're the size of a semi in oncoming traffic and you have to be like over on one side because it's a craggy mountain or whatever, it gets pretty gnarly. And it's hard to get the same thing that other people get in traffic, like road rage or whatever, because someone cut you off or whatever, because it's so like you're used to survival driving almost, like ice road truckers type stuff. So the little things don't get to you as much. But yeah, there have been a lot of moments where like literally we've been teetering off a cliff.
Oh man, it's amazing how similar our lives in some ways sound. Without, and
Yeah,
I don't know, like personally, I haven't listened to much of your the content that you put out there, and I don't mean that offensively at all. I actually mean it
sure.
in more of a special way that I still feel really connected and like
Cool.
respectful and inspired by you just by your essence, because I got to like cross paths with you at the Bulletproof conference,
Uh-huh.
and I was just really taken back of I could tell how much so many other people were there, like there for you and looking up to you, and how you really gave your time. And you would sit there and talk. There was a lot of people fighting for your attention, and you kind of patiently gave it to one person after another, after
Yeah.
another. And I thought, regardless of the content you're putting out there, to me that said more than a lot of words would. So I really
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
you for.
One thing that I learned from my dad, which was like such an incredible gift, was that they come from like a farming family in New Hampshire, like middle of nowhere. And something happened when my dad went into his brother's, like who was an engineer, went into their big like manufacturing facility, and dad, shook the hands of like the younger generation who were kind of working in one part and talked to the CEO, went into the main office and stuff like that. And then I think it was the secretary said, you're one of the only people, you and your brother are some of the only people who treat everyone exactly the same way. From the CEO down to the janitor, everyone gets respect, everyone gets, love and care. And I think that's something that in a lot of ways, Western society has kind of lost respect for itself and the people around. And so I know that I've needed help in cases. And so I'm very happy to be the one who's giving it sometimes.
That's awesome. That's a cool life lesson, and I'm kind of having this imagination. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That when you've been in the presence of very influential or what some people would describe as powerful people, and you're describing, I mean, and you're treating them just like you would treat a friend, I have a feeling that was very advantageous for y'all being able to connect on a more meaningful level than someone that just like praises them and looks up to them and like idolizes them. Is that true at all for you? Have you found that?
Totally, I think so. One of the like crazy things that's happened recently is I realized that the Tim McGraw band was listening to my show and actually getting like a bunch of results. Like some of them lost over 40 pounds by doing some of the primal type exercises and experimenting with fasting and getting into like everything that I was talking about. I have no idea who's listening on the other end a lot of the time, but when I met them in person, as not only that, but as a musician, like we went into the studio together. And it was just so like surreal because like the bass player David had played with John Fogerty for like 9 years, and Bonnie Raitt, and like all of these people who are rock stars in my mind. And same thing with, with the drummer and everyone else in the band. And so it's always like very humbling to realize that even, Tim McGraw is a regular guy. Everyone there is like a totally regular person. They have regular people problems and fears and hangups and whatever. And that's like so awesome when you meet people who are like that. And I've led kind of a crazy life in the sense where I started in Washington, D.C., working in consulting with bigwigs, shaking hands and wearing suits or whatever to pay off my loans. And then, I've been a lot of other places as a musician or kind of in the health industry, and everyone everywhere is a total real person. I think it's really important that people realize that, because I think there's a lot of, especially in our society, this, idolatry of celebrities or something like that, which is really misplaced, because we are like all of the people I've ever met are totally real.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always match up, with like what people see on camera or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and it even goes beyond, in my opinion, it even goes beyond like celebrities or musicians or big wigs. It's now becoming like how many Facebook followers, like even
Right.
within just the non-celebrity world, there's almost like an idolatry occurring because someone might have more Twitter followers or
Right. Oh,
more
sure.
Facebook fans, and it's kind of crazy how that works. It's
Yeah. Everyone is their own little celebrity, If they have Facebook followers or Twitter followers or whatever, you're at some point going to be recognized or acknowledged, because like you have this internet personality that somehow intercepts real life. And that's always pretty trippy.
Yeah, yeah. And that being said, I just wanted to let you know that I don't have anything planned necessarily in this conversation, or I almost planned on not having anything planned because I
Cool.
really just want to talk to you and
Cool, man.
just hang out with you. I don't have a specific set of questions. At our recent retreat, there was this idea, and it's so funny, I can't remember the exact. I think it was called Living Word. Someone presented this idea of living word, where you don't regurgitate or use any preconceived concepts or concepts you've learned in the past
Hmm.
to make the basis of what you're going to talk about, but you just let
Hmm.
whatever flow through you, and it
Yeah.
becomes a living word. So that's my intention on this interview.
Cool. Yeah.
And
It's like music.
yeah, yeah. See, I never got much into music, but I could definitely see. I could imagine.
Yeah. You just walk into a room and you jam and you're like, that just came out. Like, I have no idea where that came from. And at some point you realize you're not the one playing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you know what I'm talking about. And that being said, I know one thing that I'm really personally intrigued by, the little bit I know, is that you've been, like you alluded to it earlier, that you've been traveling from national park to national park for the last year, and you're living that trailer. Is it like kind of a home setup, like a tiny home type of setup, or what
Yeah,
exactly?
exactly. Yeah, it's basically just like a big box with guitars in it and food and like a tiny little kitchen and then a place to sleep, and it's awesome because it's like a moving base camp.
Yeah, that's I'm all about that. That's what we've been considering the idea, but then we got kind of into the Airbnbs, and that's like so
Sure.
easy. It's like, oh, maybe we could just do it with our car. Maybe we don't need
Yeah,
to.
you can. I mean, it's different when you're driving a huge rig around for sure.
But that being said, for the last year, like, what have been some of the highlights of living on the road? Because I just think that for me, it feels so true. Like, it almost feels beyond my mental comprehension of. I feel like very at home traveling and
Yeah.
going from place to place, and like, I guess that could be theorized of why that is. But beyond that, I'm just curious, like, what have been some of your highlights or challenging points, like low points through that adventure?
Yeah. Well, it is kind of like a cool lifestyle. It's not an easy one. A lot of people are just like, oh, I wish I could travel all the time or whatever. But it's like a full-time job. Like all the stuff that you're up against, going to new places, finding places to eat, like wondering if a side road where you're walking your dog is safe or not. Just like all sorts of crazy challenges that you wouldn't normally think about in your day-to-day life. But at the same time, one of the reasons that we've been doing it is because my my wife Allison is like so freaking awesome. She used to be a professional video game player and toured around the world, like playing video games competitively, and was on like a reality show and stuff like that. So that past lifetime of hers is nuts and super cool, but also full of similar challenges. But she's up for a lot of the things that we do, and we basically got to this point in Austin after living there for about 5 years and taking a couple of road trips and traveling a bit. But we're like sitting in this house and everything's set up, the way we want it to. We've got pretty much everything we could ever ask for or wish for. We're very fortunate. And we're like sitting on the couch and we're like, we are so bored. Like, we got to do something, like this is it, because it's basically you never arrive. You get to the American dream or whatever. You have a car and a house or whatever you want, at some point, and you're like, oh, I'm not any happier now. This isn't any more interesting. It never really gets better. It's a journey. So I also found that 4 or 5 years before that moment, when I first moved to Austin, I took everything that I had, put it into this little dinky apartment, and after a few months, I came home on a Saturday night, and the whole thing was up in flames. Like, lost everything, all my instruments, all my the stuff I was working on for books and albums, and it basically everything I ever had, including kind of like the stuff that I didn't know about my identity that was stored in having those things that remind you of who you are. So
one step back, your house burned down or a storage unit burned down? Which one was it?
An apartment building. So like everyone who lived there, including the community, was like gone.
Oh, dang.
And fortunately, no one died in it, but a lot of people lost pets and stuff like that. But more than that, it was such like a startling thing to have happen, because like you don't realize, it's not like you need stuff, but your identity and your day-to-day habits kind of like remind you of who you are and what your place is, what your purpose is, and all of that. And so when something kind of like tragic happens and takes everything out, it's horrible and tragic, especially if you're not ready for it. But having gone through that and dealt with it was really important in kind of making me who I am, and making a lot of other people, I think, who they are going through a tragedy or a huge setback or whatever. Because I was broke. I had nothing. The insurance company denied that I had a policy, even though I'd been paying for it. Like all sorts of things happened. And then after, a few years, and then, fast forward to when I was on the couch with Allison, I realized that kind of getting rid of all of our stuff again and starting over was a really healthy thing to do. So sold my house, like sold my cars, sold pretty much all of our stuff or gave it away or whatever, and just started traveling around. And it's not easy. A lot of people are just like, oh, lucky to be you or whatever. No, I had to like cut off a lot of things, piss a lot of people off, do a lot of weird stuff to basically get out of a system that wants to like chain you into having monthly bills and living in the same place and paying taxes and whatever, and not ever really getting out of the grind, I guess you could say.
And then you hit the road.
Then we hit the road, and we've been traveling for like a year straight now, which is the longest we've ever done it. And it's it's pretty awesome, but still has its own challenges. Like having a podcast and an internet business and all sorts of other things when you don't have internet for like 6 months is challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, when you say you don't have internet, did you not get do you have a wireless router or one of those things that kind of creates a hotspot?
So what we've been doing recently, I've done a couple of shows from the trailer, like up in the mountains. If I get good enough cell signal, I can actually do that. But now I just try to record most of the shows like you get an Airbnb place or like a home away vacation rental for a few days that has solid internet, where I can just set up my little station and record, like 8 things every day, and then, go back in the woods and hang out.
All right. Now, a quick question backwards. That fire that occurred, was that before or after you were the fat burning man?
That was before.
Oh,
so
okay.
Fat Burning Man is like a triple entendre. There are a lot of like funny little meanings in it.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Is that something that other people know about, that name may have stemmed somewhat from the fire?
Yeah, a bit. I don't really talk about it that much because it's kind of like a deeper, heavier thing that wouldn't seem like it would have a lot to do with this, but it actually really does, because
yeah, it sounds like it to me.
When something like that happens, like you kind of need to look forward to reevaluate what you want to do in this world. And for me, that was really critical in, I had been working in consulting for a while, which I was fortunately able to pay off my college loans and stuff like that. And I kept doing it for a while, but I got to this point where I realized I had to do something that was more meaningful. As much as I liked it, and I was learning lots of stuff. I was learning how the world worked pretty much from the inside out or whatever. But I realized that it was important that I do something that could help people more, and the best ways to help people, as you well know, aren't always the most, established, safe routes or jobs or choices or whatever that you can make in life. Usually you have to just kind of hang yourself out there and be like, I'm going to give this a shot. This is crazy, but I'm going to try it and see if I can help people. And if you just keep trying, you be persistent about it, it works. And then it kind of turns into a life calling that even when things get really hard, you have to just keep doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm happy you said that. It's important for me to hear from somebody else.
Yeah.
The triple entendre. I got the kind of the burning, everything burned away, and to me that was like a metaphorical representation of how that kind of was excess stuff that you didn't need in your life.
Sure.
And it taught you something new. And then I obviously get the physical. Is there a third one that I'm?
So there's like fat burning man. So if you eat kind of like the caveman way, paleo way, low carb way, you're burning fat instead of carbs as your main fuel source. So that's another one. And obviously there's fat burning man, which is kind of like all about fat burning or whatever, which is losing weight. It kind of implies that. And then there's fat, burning man, which is just kind of funny and like you hear it without knowing that you hear it, right? You get this like some people say they're just like, what do you mean like a obese person on fire? Are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, not like that. But it's still kind of, I studied brain science and psychology, and I've been a musician for a long time. So coming up with like cool names that are memorable, I had better names, ones that I liked a lot more, but there was just something kind of cool about that one that was memorable and interesting and kind of fun, tongue in cheek. And with one of the biggest reasons I started is because I saw, Jillian Michaels up there dominating the podcast charts, and a lot of media is dominated by people who are basically like telling people that they could be fit and healthy, but they had to be miserable at the same time and hate it in order to get any results. And I wanted to be, like a total counterpoint to that, the opposite of that, where you can be happy and healthy at the same time. So on my show and in most of my public persona or whatever, I'm much better behaved than I am in real life. Anyone who knows me close personally definitely knows that. I've been a Dartmouth frat boy in past lifetimes, and that still comes out every once in a while.
Cool. And Burning Man is just such a buzzword these days.
It sure is. Yeah, we went this past year. That was interesting.
Was that the first time you'd been?
That was the first time.
I have
and our truck caught fire on the way to Burning Man.
Oh,
Fat Burning
man,
Fat Burning Man catches fire on the way to Burning Man.
Watch out for these words that you're creating.
Right, yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah. So all the traveling's like, where I've been traveling. I've been to almost every state except about 4 of them, and I really intend on making the journey, the destination. Like, we just went from San Diego to Oregon for our recent retreat, and mumost people took like a 3 or 4 hour flight, but I actually took it like a month to get from San Diego to
cool,
Oregon.
Yeah, that's a long flight.
We took it real nice and slow, and I just learned. I love the United States. Like, I love our country. So I'm curious, have like any of the spots you visited or stayed, did you resonate deeply with, or like, are there places that were kind of under the radar? I know sometimes it's a little weird for me to talk about like certain secret waterfalls online, because I'm like, this might take the magic away a little bit if too many people show up. But I'm just curious, like, have you been to some places and you're like, what? No one told me about this. Like, what?
Yeah, there have been so many places like that. Like, first time I went to Utah, just generally speaking, driving around there through the deserts and the canyons and the mountains. Like, you go through every scene from Star Wars pretty much in like a 60-minute drive or whatever. And petrified forest, where you have these ancient trees that were petrified, turned into these incredible logs full of crystals that are like rainbow colored that have shattered and turned into the whole landscape. That's in Arizona. When the sun hits it just right, you're like, this is, you don't feel like you're on Earth. That's for sure. So going to, that's just a little, I don't even know if it's a state park. It might be a national monument, but there are a couple of them that have things like that. Bandelier National Monument is by Santa Fe, where you can climb up into cliff dwellings. There's a place that we're staying outside of Nashville right now, which is called Old Stone Fort. It's a state park And that's basically I think a 5th century Native American ruins that, has this huge thing the size of many football fields. That's these stone mounds that have this encapsulated little piece that lines up perfectly with the solstice every year from both sides at perfect angles and stuff. And so it doesn't even matter where you are. You can find something really weird or really cool, usually within like an hour's drive. And so that's just what we've been trying to do for a while. And there's so many things that I wish everyone would see. But mostly, I think a lot of people, especially for flying from urban area to urban area, you don't really feel like you deserve it when you get there. And so a lot of times you don't experience the process, the journey in the same way. Like when you drive the Pacific Coast Highway, right, up from San Diego, say, up the Napa Valley or something like that, and then you go north of there and you drive there, you see the landscape change. You kind of feel energetically how people have a totally different culture and different ways of going about things, and you can see everything change kind of incrementally. And so there's something really like magical about driving, biking, walking, or whatever, like getting from one place to another in a way that's not instantaneous.
Oh yeah, I can totally empathize, especially about like the energetic shift from. I mean, sometimes it's like you go over an inlet.
Mm-hmm.
Like even I lived in Encinitas for a good bit, which is North County, San Diego, and
Mm-hmm.
there's something about there's a beach called Seaside Reef, and then there's a beach called Ponto Beach, and past Ponto Beach is like this thing called Bataquitos Lagoon, and then
Mm-hmm.
once you cross that lagoon, the whole area changes,
Yeah.
and I'm just it sounds like you have really got to experience that over and over and over again. Is there, other than just observing it, were there any lessons that you could put into words that have taught you about life? I'm just thinking that about myself, and I don't have an answer right now, so I'm curious if you do. I might if I
Yeah.
think about it, but
Well, I think it's really important that people realize what their environment is doing to them. Like if you are in a house or in a workplace or even in a room that kind of like brings you down for some reason, maybe it's clutter, maybe it's a dangerous area, maybe it's too much advertising, maybe the noise, or too much electricity. Certain things bug different people out. For me, I think I'm more on the audio side of things. Being a musician, I'm very sensitive to, like, if there's bad music playing, I want out. If they're playing that shopping mall crap, then I don't want to be there. But the best thing that I always find is some way of connecting with nature, and the more intact nature is, the more beautiful it is, the more kind of elevated you become. And I know that's one of the reasons you run your retreats, is because you go to these incredible places and people are like, oh my God, I forgot that life was amazing. Right. And so it's important to experience that as often as you can. And usually it just takes, a step out your front door to go somewhere really cool, to get you there. And it could be a park, it could be anything that kind of gets you active, going to the lake or something like that. But it's almost always in nature.
that's awesome. I'm really happy you answered about how sometimes it's subtle, but how powerful it can be in a way that we're becoming our environment, or we're becoming
Yeah.
more like our environment than some people may consciously know.
Hmm.
And I've just seen that in myself, how different I am depending if I spend like a long time in like an urban area versus like a
Hmm.
long time in a place where there's a bunch of like fit, inspirational, like extreme athletes around me. I
Right.
not only do I look like a different person, I feel like a different person. I all of a sudden have a little bit of a different personality.
Hmm.
So that being said, for you, have you found some environments like other than nature, like, or have there been any cities where you feel like, oh, I'm so alive, versus cities that you're like, this is like a different vibration than I'm best at.
I can tell you, Washington, D.C., living there was a lot different from living in Austin, Texas. Like, yeah, Washington, D.C., if you watch those political dramas, like, people are super uptight, usually don't sleep enough, kind of like New York, except more political wonk-ish, which is just totally not my deal. And also, I think I'm particularly sensitive to that, being a performer, being a musician, seeing that some places just don't care about art, really, and others do. Others, that, like, art is built into the culture. People who are musicians are also, like, respected by society, or artists, or people who are commenting about things. Places down south, I found, have like a really nice kind of like lower key energy about them. Like Austin and Nashville, for instance, are very kind of like relaxed compared to where I come from in the Northeast, where I forget how short-tempered a lot of people can be, especially, I don't blame them, and I was the same way. When it's negative 20 degrees for weeks on end and you need to, spend an hour defrosting your car and your fingers and your hands and, your breath is freezing coming out of your mouth, I can see why people would be a little bit bummed out sometimes when you don't see the sun for 8 months or whatever. But so that's why it's important to be really sensitive to that and be like, if you don't totally love a place, know that today you can get out of it. You can move. You can go to a different place in a way that like other generations didn't have that option in a lot of cases. You couldn't telecommute. Like that didn't exist. You couldn't start a business from anywhere, which is, one of the most promising things I've seen, I think. But I mean, I started by telecommuting, and that's what this has turned into is just kind of traveling around. And mostly what we're doing right now is we've seen like pretty much every state. We've been to a lot of different places in the world. And at some point we want to have kids, probably like relatively soon, in the next few years for sure. And we want to make sure that the place we move to and put down some roots is one that we really love and will love for a long time. So that's one of the things that we're up to too, city shopping.
You're a smart man.
I have a lot of friends who are older than me and have gone through this and have given really cool advice that I am, it does not come from me for sure. It's something that I've been fortunate to, ask the right questions and people are giving me really cool answers,
And speaking of you being a smart man, I feel a little embarrassed to ask this, but what exactly does it mean, telecommute? What does that mean?
Well, basically, okay, so when I was working in consulting at the beginning, I was working in an office. And over the course of time, I'm like, I really don't like being in an office. But would you mind if I work from X place?
Oh, okay.
And so it took me, at first, it was, me working from home more. And then it was me starting a consulting business with some other people who wanted me to work. And I said, yes, on one condition, that I'm not going to be wherever you are probably.
Okay.
And so I would just fly in, once a month or something like that. And if you're really high value to whoever you're working with or for or whatever, then most people would be surprised by the amount of leeway you can get. If you're a parent or something like that, you want to take care of your kids from home and you still work really hard and you prove that you can do it outside of an office environment, it's one of the best things you can ever do. Because, a lot of times I'll work outside in the sun or I'll work in the woods if I have internet or if I don't too sometimes. It's like people forget that they can actually do stuff without being connected. And in fact, in a lot of cases, that's when I do my best writing, my best creating, because I'm not getting like bap, 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 a bunch of stuff thrown at me. It's like, okay, I'm coming online in 3 days. This is time I'm going to work on stuff that, is important to me so that I can create more than if I'm constantly replying to all this stuff. And I think so many people are bogged down these days that it's important to do that.
Great advice. I love it. That's really good advice. Solid. That being said, how do you generate income now, like with the lifestyle that you're living? What's like your main ways of, I'm just curious, and you can answer that in whatever is the most appropriate way, but I'm just out of my own curiosity.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of came up to an interesting challenge because I was working in consulting, making really good money, not working that many hours from anywhere. So like great gig, hard to turn that down or whatever, even if you don't totally love it. But I was getting so much like traction with my podcast and Fat Burning Man, the blog and other stuff like that I realized, I was getting these emails about setting this meeting to talk about a meeting we're having next Friday and just blah. Next to, oh my God, Abel, I've lost 20 pounds. I feel totally different and I have all this energy. I don't know what to do with it. Like, what should I do next? And, like these really life-changing type emails and phone calls. And so I'm just like, all right, I gotta make this work somehow because I can't do that crap anymore. I have to do the stuff that really matters. And so how do you turn that into a business? The way that I did it is I started by coaching people one-on-one and then group coaching, and then enough people were listening that from my own audience and listener base, certain people wanted to work with me. And so I'd give them like a little project or whatever. And then we'd build out cookbooks and apps and other things that, like, people who are listening and to my show and reading my blog, I would ask them what they wanted, what they were missing or whatever. And then based upon all the stuff that they were saying, I'd started to make products, ebooks, audio downloads, videos, a coaching community, and then launching apps. The apps did really well, as you read in the bio. I was shocked by how well they did, but it makes sense because, like, if I have a podcast and almost everyone who listens to it is listening through iTunes, then saying, hey, we made this awesome app for you guys based on the recipes that you love most. Check it out. All of a sudden it goes straight up to number one and then keeps going. Then we launched, like a half dozen more that did the same thing. So it's really a matter of being simple and targeted, and not just like creating crap for the world or whatever and being like, I could probably sell this. Be like, ask people what they want, put a lot of effort into it, and then make it awesome. And so for me, one of the secrets is I go up and down. Sometimes my business makes a lot of money, and sometimes it doesn't. Like, releasing the book is really interesting because you don't really make money as an author. You get an advance, but after that, especially if you don't make the advance back, which 7 out of 10 books don't, you that product no longer makes you money. It makes the publisher money. And so, like, selling things, it gets really complicated and really interesting. And I've had a number of months where I've lost like 10 grand, 20 grand, 60 grand, just because I have like such a great team that I've tried to build. And so now I want to make this something that can really help as many people as possible. And I kind of sucked it up and realized I can't do it all alone. And so having a great team is something that I really care about. And that definitely comes with its own challenges, when you need to make multiple tens of $1,000s every month, or even six figures every month to keep the jobs for the people you care about a lot. It becomes its own challenge and really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy. Are these typical questions people ask you, or is this like what's your typical interview about?
But no, typically people will ask me more about the lifestyle factors like diet and exercise and nutrition. But I love coming on shows like this and other people's shows who kind of talk about totally different things, maybe business type things, because that's a big part of what I do. People see one side of you, like the little, for me, like if you think about the amount of time that I actually do podcasting, 150 shows I've done about, each one's an hour long. I would multiply that by like 10 or 20 or maybe even 30, the amount of work that goes into that, the amount of planning and thinking and whatever. And so if you think about it that way, I'm spending, 1/30 of my working hours on something that people are getting 100% of. So it's like that. I think that's one of the reasons that sometimes people get the wrong idea about you. Like the first time I met Mark Sisson, the guy who does Mark's Daily Apple and the Primal Blueprint, awesome guy. But I was so surprised because we talked for like 2 hours, and he's so used to talking to everyone about paleo primal stuff or whatever that he found me, and he's just like, oh, you're smart. I want to talk to you about business. And so we talked for like 2 hours about, blogging and how to like be independent in a world that wants you to sign these contracts that say that you could never say anything against their brand or whatever, and all these crazy sponsorships. But how do you be like an independent voice? And so I really like when people ask different kinds of questions, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've taken on a lot, and you've taken on a lot successfully. And seems like, from my perspective, it seems like you're managing it in a very healthy way for the physical aspects, and you being able to do all this and kind of lead all these different projects or co-facilitate all these projects. What are some of like I don't want to care to get too deep into it, but are there just like certain rituals or routines that keep you physically sound and physically healthy?
Yeah. So not only did my truck catch fire right before Burning Man, but a week before that, I was out bouldering with a friend and broke my foot. So
that's funny. This is me now. Yesterday,
so
I didn't break it, but I rolled it pretty good at this thing, the Blue Hole in Oregon. It was pretty interesting. So
brutal. Yeah. So it's like how all of a sudden you have this conflict where it's like, okay, I need to be fit for obvious reasons, not just because it's important to me, but it's like what I do. Yet I can't do deadlifts, squats, run, bike, jump, pull-ups, anything, because you're out of commission, and it would break you more to do that sort of physical activity. So that's like a huge challenge that I came up against, because once you know the fundamentals of what it takes to be lean and fit, like once you know that squats are one of the best exercises you could ever do, or pull-ups or body weight, like the old-fashioned stuff. Once you know that, it's just a matter of doing it, unless you can't do it because you're injured. So I had to totally reinvent like what I was doing every day. And so I went from doing like the exercises that I described to being like, okay, what can I do without my foot? I guess I could do handstand push-ups, right? I've always wanted to be like kind of an acrobat or whatever. And so I just basically went inverted and started doing fingertip push-ups and handstand push-ups and other things that were more like high intensity movements for just a few minutes a day, because I couldn't do the biking, the running, or any sort of endurance stuff, which I don't do all the time anyway, but it's nice to have those options for sure. So I had to reinvent it. And what I've been doing ever since is basically like 2 to 5 minutes of exercise pretty much every morning, and not really long workouts that much. And what's been interesting is that I've maintained body fat, maintained muscle mass, even improved my strength in most things, because I switched it up. And I basically added to my skills. And one of the cool things that happens too when you try new things is like doing fingertip push-ups. At the beginning, I could do, like 3 or 5 or 8 or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. But over the course of time, you add like a couple a day, or you just kind of move it to the next level every once in a while. All of a sudden, I hit the point where I could do as many fingertip push-ups as regular push-ups pretty much. Other parts of my body would tire out before my bones and my fingers and my tendons and whatever, because they just got stronger and they adapted. And then I could play guitar a lot better and a lot faster, and I could grip other things. I didn't even know that was possible to, improve your dexterity that much. But that's the type of cool thing that happens when you improvise with the way that you lead your life, because for one reason or another, you have to, my mom's a Zumba instructor, and one day the dog came in while she was dancing around doing Zumba and knocked her over, and she broke her foot, And so she's like, she's almost 60, and like, she's not going to go and do a lot of the fingertip push-ups and handstand push-ups and stuff like that. So life is full of its own challenges, and you need to be ready for them.
Cool. And that being said, there's been a lot of people, maybe you've come across this too, that I've been inspired by, Marxism being one, or like Laird Hamilton, or Paul Chek, or just people, especially that just seem to, or Tim Ferriss or Tony Robbins. These guys seem to be living pretty holistic, healthy lifestyles and making a big impact on the earth. And a lot of things that I found out that they were doing that I didn't not all of them, it was kind of a surprise, was the polar plunging or cold showers. Yeah. And that's something that you advocate as well?
I have done that before. Here's the thing. It definitely works. It definitely gets you going. It releases all sorts of hormones. You can probably burn more fat doing that regularly. The challenge with me, is I'll try almost anything, and I'll guinea pig on myself for a while. The challenge with me is I just realized, like, I don't like taking a cold shower every day. Every once in a while, it's really cool. I think the thing that's important to long-term health is really exercising your physiological functions. Like, it's important to shiver every once in a while, especially in the winter. It's important to get too hot and sweat out everything you can for a while when it's hot in the summer. And we're so used to living in, AC environments pretty much every hour of the day, because you're going from like your house to your car, which also is air conditioned, whether for heat or cold, and then going to an office and then back, which you're never really getting out in the elements. And there's something about the elements, that connection with nature, that connection with the seasons, that's really important to your physiology for all sorts of scientific reasons, but mostly just because it inherently makes sense as a human that I would want to feel that sometimes. But yeah, I don't need to do a polar bear plunge every day.
Cool. If you ever get back into it like full-heartedly and you really want to know where a lot are, I've been scouting them out for a while now.
I'm definitely down. If it's an event, if it's like a special experience, I'm totally down for that every once in a while. It's just like, some people will, they get really into it, and they get, bags and bags of ice and put it in their bathtub every day. I've had some people on my show who do that. And I know Tim Ferriss talked about that on my show for a while too. I don't think he's still doing that though. It's like one of those things that you try and it's cool, but I don't know.
I've never gotten to the point where I'm like buying and investing in ice, but
Right.
I do love when I'm traveling. I'm like, well, if there's cold water, I'm like much more highly
Yeah,
incentivized to go check that spot out.
totally.
I'm just like sometimes I wonder if I'm just like chasing waterfalls all the time,
Yeah.
and everything else is just like whatever else happens. Well, cool, man. So, you're married now because you said your wife and in the bio it said your fiance. When did y'all get married?
We it's kind of funny because we're not big on like throwing parties for ourselves. And so what we did is we decided to have my mom, who's super cool. She's an herbalist and all hippy dippy, and like I give that as a compliment. And my dad, who's just like so sweet, and they're down in Florida. And so we went to the beach, and just with the two of them, we dressed all up in white and had a little ceremony. My mom found this incredible like Mayan ceremony that we did,
Wow.
just like the four of us. And at some point in the next few months, I guess we'll probably like throw some shindig or whatever, but we just didn't want like a big thing. And we didn't want, a $10,000 cake and a lot of the other things that like marketers have convinced us that we need. So we're too much of rebels for that. So yeah, basically it was around this winter solstice of this past year that we decided, okay, this is it. We're considering ourselves married at this point. And it was, it's been so cool. I know I made the right call.
That's awesome. I can empathize with that totally. That's how I got engaged on April
Cool.
Fool's Day and got married on April 2nd. And then
No way.
that was about it. But
That's
I
fun.
think we kind of told ourselves too, like, well, eventually have a big wedding or something, or like a
Yeah,
bigger wedding so everyone can come. But so I'll be curious if you follow through with that or whenever it
we'll see.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to just tell yourself that, but all of a sudden it's like, man, 2 years has passed. I wonder if
Right.
we're ever gonna have that wedding.
Right. We'll have a barbecue or something.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you have so you travel with your dog too. That's next level. So the Airbnb, like, where's your dog at right now?
She's here. We get dog friendly places, which,
Oh, okay.
that makes it a lot trickier for sure. It definitely limits your options.
This is our pet right here for right now. It's a bonsai.
Nice. Yeah, a lot easier to manage than a dog, I think.
Daniel's sign. Most places are bonsai friendly, but we've considered the dog, but we're like, man, would that really, that might be a little trickier if I'm inspired that you're doing it.
Totally.
So, and I guess it'll probably be a pretty good time to wrap up here. But what's anything next? Anything like exciting coming up that you're allowed to
Yeah,
give us a
totally.
hint about?
Yeah. Well, on the music side, it's been really cool. Started recording with some of the Tim McGraw band and made this record that we're going to be coming out with this summer at some point called Swamp Thing, which is basically like old school. We recorded almost everything in like 1 to 2 takes, and it sounds like it's from this New Orleans kind of like blues rock jazz band, and it's fun. It came out of nowhere, and I think people are really gonna like it. I haven't done the music release of new stuff in a while, so this will be the first time like coming back on the radar that I think will be pretty exciting. Because when I started up Fat Burning Man, that was kind of like I had done like 250 shows in a year and just burned myself out, and so I'm just like, okay, I'm going to put my energy into building something else, and so once the Tim McGraw bands started interacting and I met them, they pulled me back into music again, which is just like so cool. So that's coming out, and then my new book is called The Wild Diet. You can get that just about anywhere. But even more exciting, we started doing a bunch of cooking classes. My wife and I, and the dog too, makes a lot of cameos. And so you can find all those at fatburningman.com. And we're doing like shopping guides and a bunch of like really cool resources that, like I was saying before, our community has been asking for. And so we've been building them into ebooks, audio, video downloads, like virtual courses and stuff like that. And we have coaching. So that's all at fatburningman.com.
Awesome, man. Well, it's really cool connecting with you and just being able to hang out with you a little longer. And
Right
get to
on.
know
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, get to know you better. How long are you gonna be in Nashville, or do you know where you're going next, or?
We don't know yet. I'll be in Austin for a bit, doing some book signings and stuff. But we travel quite a bit, so I'll be all over the place.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out a way to potentially cross paths one day and go
Love
out for
to.
a polar plunge somewhere in some blue hole.
That sounds like fun.
And you mentioned
Cool.
the Mayan wedding.
Yeah.
We just went to the Yucatan Peninsula. Have you
Oh,
ever
right on.
have you ever been in that area?
We were just down in Peru, and we were in Brazil before that. But no, we haven't. But we've been to Mexico a couple of times. But yeah, we'd like to do some more travel down there because it's a different world.
Oh man, like if you like, especially if you like swimming, I'm not sure if you have the same affinity to water that I do, or if you get
Yeah.
activated like that. But that whole Yucatan Peninsula has all these things called cenotes. I'm
Hmm.
not sure if you've ever heard of that
I
cenote
have.
system.
Yeah.
That was like out of this world. Talking about out of
Right.
this world, that was like one of the strangest things I've ever seen, and awesome,
Right.
like most awesome things I've ever seen.
Totally.
Yeah, man, well, it was really cool chatting with you.
Yeah. You too. Hopefully, our paths will cross someday.
All right, cool, man. Well, make it a great day and say hello to the family from our family.
All right. Thanks.